What's up? This is Rebel Radio.
What up? What up? This is DJ Newmark.
This is Peanut Butter Wolf.
It's your boy. It's okay.
Keep checking out Rebel Radio.
Rebel Radio.
This is Rebel Radio.
We're in the place right here. Rebel Radio is going down.
Would you say Rebel Radio?
Oh, wait. Let's do it again.
Rebel Radio.
What's up, Rebels? Welcome back to Rebel Radio, the weekly show where I bring you the rebels who are shaping our culture. I'm your host, Josh Levine. This week, I'm sitting with Terry Guy. He's the founder of Secret Walls. I love this company and this brand and everything they're doing. If you don't know, Secret Walls is a series of graffiti battles happening all over the world. They have them online. They have them popping up in the metaverse soon, if not already. And it's just a really cool story of this brand that's built on culture. And I love the way he talks about putting the culture first and the community and using that to build a great company. Some great lessons. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Let's get into it right now with Terry Guy. I'm excited to dig in and see how you got to this point. So I always like to start at the very beginning, and I think for a lot of us, music defines our lives. Do you remember the first record you ever bought for yourself?
First record it was a record, MC Hammer.
Piece of music.
yeah, a vinyl. I didn't really have vinyl, but
okay.
MC Hammer, nice. Randomly, because he was wearing those big baggy pants. And I saw a few tracks that caught my imagination.
And that's in London?
Yeah, no, actually, I'm from the Isle of Wight, which so going right back from a little place called the Isle of Wight, which is like a Victorian beach island in the very south, known really for famous music festivals like the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix. I think it was Hendrix's last ever gig before he passed in London, but they used to do 100,000 plus festivals down there. So I came from there, grew up there, no graffiti, no street art, kind of scraped my way through college, learning computer programming and bits. Just about got enough to get to university that then got me to London, and that was the kind of ticket to here's the real world.
Sure.
So yeah, I kind of jumped in the deep end, didn't know anybody in London, and got exposed to graffiti. I was into hip hop already, so talking about music, I was I bought a lot of Biggie, Tupac, and I was into all the East Coast, West Coast stuff.
Yep.
And then I went to a b-boy event, again, never been before, but it was kind of like this b-boy battle weekly dance-off thing, and I was like, this is awesome. And I saw graffiti on the walls, and I was 18 at the time, and that kind of it blew my mind, and kind of that really seeded Secret Walls. Like, it was another 2 years before Secret Walls was a thing, but I started networking in those circles and started to see a path, So
so where does that shift happen if you're studying computer programming and you've got your sort of passion on the side?
Yeah.
Do you remember those worlds coming together and deciding, okay, this is going to be my path?
So I was studying digital animation and computer design for my degree.
Okay. So
it kind of moved from coding to website design and animation and Maya and all these old softwares that maybe don't even exist anymore. I thought in my head I was going to be an animator for Disney or something. I thought that was the dream. Okay. But quite quickly, year and a half into the course, I realized I was probably one of the worst in my class, and I was going to just about coast through again, which was kind of the story up to that point.
Sure.
Wasn't very good at education. And I was always focused on, what the shortcut might be, or the hustle, or the passion. But yeah, when I went to that b-boy event and started mixing graffiti artists and seeing kind of talent on a wall that was only selling for $30 at the time. It's canvases this big for $50. So I was just this is crazy. What's going on? Realized galleries weren't giving street artists a chance. Banksy hadn't started really then. Banksy wasn't a thing. I went to a Banksy show around that time, and he was selling work for £100 a print, which I regret not buying.
Hopefully you bought a bunch of them.
I didn't, but I wish I did. But I read a story that some student spent thousands of pounds of their student loan on multiple prints and basically ended up with a few $100,000 a few years later. But it was a tough time for those kinds of artists, and I just started to hear a regular narrative, and we kind of formed this thing called Monorex, which is still a business today, but it was the original collective. And that was me being the kind of website designer / manager of a crew of graffiti artists that we felt we could build something around. We didn't really know what. And it started as a party, a live art party. Mm-hmm. We thought that was going to be a way to market ourselves. Filled a room, had some crazy canvas, live art, like DJ experiences. And then I just needed to like figure out how do you then elevate that? And that's kind of where Secret Walls came from. It was like, how do we create something that people care more for, and the narrative is extended. And I'm a big soccer guy or football guy. And I recently saw Fight Club and the Warriors, and there was a lot of competition and battles and things in my head, and the b-boy battles and the rap battles. And I just thought, well, why don't we just do an art battle? We weren't the first, obviously. Sure. There was graffiti battles way before us, but that was all part of the inspiration. So Secret Walls was born from that, and I suppose, it just snowballed from there.
Yeah. So going back to that first night, or was there a moment when you realized we've got something?
That was the first battle. Yeah. So I just naively booked a bar in Shoreditch, which is now kind of like the Williamsburg of London. Mm-hmm. At the time, it was kind of drug dealers and hookers and just crazy shit on the streets. But we booked a cheap bar. 500 people turned up, queue around the corner. Something clicked, and it was before social media, so it was like just as MySpace was kicking off. We used MySpace, but really it was the physical flyer drops that we were doing and word of mouth. And we somehow struck gold first night, and there was just an appetite. You could feel the electricity in the air, and everybody was like, "Is this a tournament?" I'm like, "No, it was a one-off event." But yeah, it can be. And then all of a sudden, 16 artists were signed up, and I built a kind of monthly knockout series that spanned like 6 months, and then it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. We had to keep scaling the venue. Still weren't really making any money. It was kind of like take a little bit off the bar, when the bar hits a certain number, get some of the door, but it kind of covered itself. And I was working 3 part-time jobs and kind of still studying. But yeah, it was kind of, it wasn't a company, it wasn't a business, it was a lifestyle. Sure. But I suppose the short answer is Reebok called us up maybe near the end of that tournament and were like, can you come to Barcelona and set up this battle inside a Reebok kind of booth that was huge. And they were just at the time doing a Pharrell Williams shoe drop, the ice cream drop. Mm-hmm. And they were like, we need something to pull a crowd to kind of, rally around this ice cream shoe release. And we want you to battle every day for 5 days. And we were like, okay. Nice. We're like £30,000. So we just made up a number, plus flights and Airbnb, and flew a squad of 15 of us out there, hosted this Reebok tournament. And we had stars turn up, and Pharrell and Thierry Henry, the soccer star. And it was kind of, from that point, it was like, shit, this is a business, and there's like opportunities to travel. And then all of a sudden someone in Tokyo was like, can you come to a design festival? And then someone, in Amsterdam was like, can you come over here and do this thing here? And it just became a non-stop kind of thing. So
nice.
Yeah.
You mentioned, obviously there's battles, we had the Levitz battles here in the 80s. Stuff like powwow, right?
Yeah.
Were you even aware of that kind of stuff at the time? Like, were you pulling inspiration from those guys, or were you just kind of in your own world and didn't even know about it?
Not really LA culture or history. I mean, I knew about American graffiti history a little bit, from watching certain DVDs, right? So Star Wars, etc. And I knew OG Slick had battled one time when he was a young kid, who's now a friend and Secret Walls artist. I knew bits, but I was kind of, again, building this plane as we were trying to fly. Sure. But obviously, it was heavily influenced from graffiti culture and street art, which street art wasn't even really a thing then. It didn't really have a name at the time. But bits and bobs. And then I found out there was a thing called, there was like another art battle in New York that it kind of started around the same time as us. So then we realized that there was competition in the space, and that was good. It was like, okay, cool. That kind of like gets you going again. So we were trying to make up our own rule set, which I think we did pretty well.
Yeah.
And it was very soccer inspired, again, because that's me and Jimmy's big passion. It was 90 minutes on the clock. That's a soccer game. One, team versus team or one versus one. There's like a left and a right, and then crowd cheer / 2 guest judges, 3-point system. It was very basic, but it was different from your usual kind of graffiti battle. We tried to just carve out our own rule set.
Yeah.
So
was there some early mistakes that you made that you thought, let's not do that again?
yeah, add color was one thing. I tried color for a rum sponsored event once upon a time. They were like, you need to use a certain red. We took a check, and kind of at the time it was good money. But the color just didn't work in the world of the black and white vibes that we were building. Again, that was kind of, there's lots of graffiti battle, mural events, festivals in full color. Let's just do this thing in black and white. So color was, for me back then, a mistake, but an experiment.
So what do you think that's like, creating that limitation of black and white, what does that do?
Originally, it helped differentiate us from everything else, and it kind of helped build a brand. Like I suppose Supreme, you got the red and white, and you just know. Like you see that colorway. Weirdly, it's something in the head, right? It just kind of clicks, and certain brands come to mind. So anybody that looked at black and white murals or art thought Secret Walls, even though not everything that was black and white was ours. But it kind of just helped us own a lane. We've actually embraced color now, but that's a whole nother story. But now that we've gone full digital battles, Jimmy twisted my wrist and said, let's bring color in and let's take color onto Instagram. And literally last month we added color in, and I kind of protected the OG battle and said, this is untouched. This stays black and white. This is the heritage. But I'm all for the future of 3D, 2D artists in our world should use color, and we kind of found a compromise, and now I'm fully behind it. But I was, at the time I was kind of like allergic to the color thing. But still love the black and white, simple, kind of effect. I think it stands out. You come to a battle, you see it on stage, those white lights on a black and white wall, 50 foot, and you got hundreds of people standing in front of that. Just the way it pops. Once you add color into those, it kind of, for me, it gets a little bit scrappy, a little bit messy. So visually, there's just something there that just pops.
Sure.
So
I love that. I mean, one of the things I love about the story is you're figuring it out as you go, like you said, and you're learning to run a business and lead people and all that stuff at once. And now you got, like I said, Jimmy says, let's do color. And then ultimately it's down to you to decide what fits and what doesn't.
Yeah, and that's kind of the growth. And, organically, as you build a business that wasn't really meant to be a business, that was originally a lifestyle and a way of traveling the world. And there's kind of we've kind of built it back to front. Some people say is like, you guys built a scene and a culture and an event before you actually made money, and that was by design. It was a passion project.
Sure.
But now we're like, okay, we're big enough, and we have the opportunity to call Nike or speak to the MLS or whoever and pitch an event and pay artists very well, and we're proud to always push for biggest budgets and biggest kind of artist fees and DJs, and we're always trying to scale, and that's taking time and energy, but we're still weirdly like this bootstrap kind of startup. Like you saw the studio there's a handful of us here. There's two guys in Chicago, and then a bunch of virtual kind of support. But it's still very scrappy. I'm founder, but we've got some structure now. We have these like weekly, the daily, weekly, and monthly calls where there's real decisions made, and all that's quite new to me. Yeah, it's that I'm still learning as a founder, CEO. It's kind of managing your scaling team. That's a whole new thing, right?
So how do you balance those things, right? How do you learn and adopt some of that stuff that lets you scale the business, but also preserve the culture side and what's special about, you don't want to just become some shitty business that, gets a bunch of funding and blows through it. And
that is the life I've like led for 16 years, from the smallest first job to the jobs and the opportunities we have now to the investors that call and say, hey, can we put some money in and have some equity or whatever it is. So it's kind of like I always look at myself, and Jimmy's definitely by my side on this. We have a very strong protective approach on the brand and the scene and the artists. And Jimmy is an artist and started as a sequels artist, so he's been on both sides. But it's like we want to protect that original DNA, but we also need to embrace how do you appeal to the masses and not be so niche, and how do the kids of tomorrow like get into what you do. And it's not just graffiti anymore; it's fine artists versus a graffiti artist and digital, etc. So we're always evolving, and we're having to have those conversations. But yeah, as brands and the money gets bigger and all that lot, that's just a regular thing that we've had to like check and check ourselves as we go. It's like certain brand wants to sponsor this. Is it right? First of all, is the brand right? Does it fit with our mission? Or do we think that this brand is kind of morally, a brand that we wouldn't want to align with, or they've made moves that don't make sense, that certain brands, without naming, ripped off artists by stealing murals and putting them in advertisements.
Sure.
Do you want to align with that kind of brand, where certain, the Futuras and certain artists of the world have had to then take to court to get paid? That's they're kind of the things that we're always aware of and always thinking about. So it's a delicate dance. And I remember at the start, when graffiti or street art and graffiti was kind of very young and brands would come into the space for the first time, everybody, not everybody, but there was a crowd of people that were like, are you selling out? By taking a Reebok check to then go to Barcelona. It's like, well, not really in my eyes, because the way we justify it is that they gave us a blank canvas. They promoted the hell out of our brand. Reebok is an awesome shoe brand that unfortunately isn't as big as it should be now, but loved the product, loved the story. It's British. It felt right at the time, and they just gave us this canvas to create. And there was very little there was a very loose creative brief, and those are the kinds of brands that we want to align with. Is they let us do our thing rather than tell us what to do, and we're just painting adverts. That's not what we want to do.
Sure, of course. So. Are there times when you've gotten that wrong? You've been overprotective or underprotective and had to...
Yeah, I think so. Definitely, you make certain moves that you maybe think you could have gone a different way. I think I'm trying to rack my brains. It's hard to think of one big mistake, which is hard, but I know there is one. I'm just trying to think. We did a Chevy road trip tour for South by Southwest.
I remember when they were doing that.
Yeah, it was like a long time ago, 8 years ago, but there was parts of that were awesome. Driving from Detroit to Austin and recording just all these mad moments and having a lot of fun on camera. But the battles were restrictive from what I remember. There was a lot of like do's and don'ts. And that was probably the first project where we'd like signed up to something that paid us again a record amount of money. So we were like, okay, this is cool. And we just jumped in with maybe not asking all the right questions. Whereas now we're a bit maturer. Like we've kind of like, we know what to ask and how to navigate and where to stay strong and say Seagulls is best in this format, and this is how we operate with partnerships and collaborations. So that was probably one that was huge at the time, and there was lots of good parts, but then there was some bits that were like, we kind of maybe shouldn't have signed up to that part,
Fair enough.
So it felt very Chevy on stage, you know. We kind of got drowned out a little bit.
Right.
So, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to name check brands, but there you go.
So, we're not sponsored by Chevy. We're sponsored by Ford, so there you go. We can talk all the Chevy. I think it's interesting the issue, the concept of selling out, right? And I think it's changed very much over the years. I think from where I sit, that doesn't come up nearly as much as it used to. Yeah. And I don't know, if that's, sure, there's a bunch of reasons.
It's changed a lot, like Kors collaborating with Nike, again, great stuff, like the Jordan shoe or the North Face collection that you just done. Is it North Face? But then some people might question that and say, well, North Face were one of those brands that just ripped off Futura, and then there's that argument. And again, everyone's got to make their own decisions.
Yep.
The collection looked awesome. I don't know North Face as a brand, but the product's great. But the thing they did against Futura was pretty blatant,
For sure.
But yeah, they got called out, and maybe they apologized. I'm not sure how that went, but I think yeah, brands in this space is definitely widely accepted now from most artists, or all artists that I work with, including like the OG Slicks and those like hardcore kind of graffiti guys. Like everybody is looking for a good opportunity with a brand now, whereas 10 years ago it was kind of a weird place to be. Some artists just didn't want to go in that world because they felt like they were crossing a line, but I feel like all that's just disappeared now. And there's infinite, opportunity if you choose the right collabs.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it seems like now there's a new minefield, right? In whether it's cancel culture or corporate responsibility, like all those.
Yeah.
Maybe the stuff we used to care about, we don't care about, and now there's a whole new set of things.
Yeah. Again, it's like there's we're trying to do good is part of our brand, like giving back to. Trying to work with kids and inspiring kids. We work with a lot of good charities and stuff, but again, that influences maybe the brands that you want to align with. So, certain brands that have good foundations. So we have like a little checklist now of a perfect kind of collab, and we try and stick as closely to that as we can. Nice. Sometimes you have to compromise on areas like creatively, and you kind of have to find a balance. But I think again, that's just part of that kind of new world, like negotiating and just being strong, in the space that you're in. Yeah. So,
what's it? So you've got this community that you've built that follows and ideally is engaged, and obviously they have ideas and reactions to what you do. So how do you process, taking in feedback and engaging with your community?
Yeah.
And then still making decisions that maybe not everybody's going to love.
Yeah, that's a good question. Back in the day, it would be very tight. It was a tight circle of 50 artists, telling us their dreams and things that they wanted to do and the places they wanted to go to. So we were building European tours and things off the back of a small squad of London artists, mainly, and then it kind of, blended into Europe. But these days, where it's like 1,000, 2,000 artists that have connected and worked with us over the years, I feel like we could do a better job. This is one of the areas that I'm always talking to the lads about, how we can step up communication, transparency, and now we're this even though we're still a team of 5, we've got a million things on our plate. How do we keep the flow between artist sequels? Don't have all the answers yet, but it's a thing that me and Max, we're normally the guys on the front line talking to the artists about certain projects or battles. So there's definitely a clean, transparent chat about creativity and the event we're building. That still happens, but I'm trying to work out a way of talking to the larger groups as we kind of grow and kind of evolve into different spaces. And obviously there's all the Discords, and we're not on that yet, but that's something that we're looking at. Just watching other brands and collectives operate in places like that. Twitter's pretty new to us, to be honest, but obviously there's a huge community there. So we're just trying to get a little bit better at opening up certain spaces in the future. So I think that you'll see that soon. This is a whole rabbit hole conversation, probably hours long, but like the DAOs. I don't know if you've seen or read much about DAOs, but the whole crypto DAO thing and the structure of that in my head sounds dreamlike, but then I'm starting to hear some bad stories about certain DAOs. But I do like the idea of community has a stake and then votes, and then it's snapshotted and certain things happen because that's where community voted. So I'm trying to read more into that, talking to a lot of Web3 crypto folks that build DAOs and things, and probably going to be somewhere, along the lines we'll be inspired or test that out. Not sure if we'll be a full DAO, but I think there's business models and collectives I see out there that are doing a good job of kind of being there's the various hybrid models that allow all of their creative members to feel like they've got a voice. So yeah, just always exploring, always trying to learn. But yeah, it's a tough. Short answer is it's tough, but I think we do a decent job. Over the years, as a small unit, we've as we've traveled globally, I think we've always tried our hardest to make sure the artists are diverse, the artists have a voice. We've always been aware of certain things in the scene and trying to just do right to the artist. Like we call it the silo mentality, which is support your local artist, and that's kind of every deck or thought we have is kind of built and connected back to Sila. If it doesn't make sense to our Sila DNA, then we have to kind of double question it and maybe throw it out. So there's
interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of internal checks.
So how does that work? We think of this global culture, but my experience, there's big differences from one part of the world to the other, and even as you're saying, coming from London, you have a different perspective on graffiti and street art than somebody coming from LA or New York, and then when you go around the world. So how do you think about that balance, right, between really reflecting the local culture? You're hosting battles all over the world. I had no idea that you guys were as global as you are.
Yeah, previously, right? The last 2 years, very LA
sure.
shut down.
Right. But I think before that it was like 50 plus countries, right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that, go into a market and kind of respect and reflect the local culture while at the same time bring in the global perspective?
Yeah, I mean, that we've been lucky enough to get to all those countries over the years, and I think the first thing is make sure you're working with local artists. Don't just fly a crew of Americans or Brits into Japan and expect to fill a room. So our concept has always been flexible enough to allow us to use a local host that's going to speak the local language or speak English and Japanese or English and Spanish or wherever we are. And then also, work with local DJs. So it's always, again, support your local artists. It's always the Sila thing first. And then if we've got the opportunity and the budget, let's then send in some of the big guns that we feel add value. Like if it's a Greg Mike, from Atlanta, who's now a pretty big deal, flying into England for the first time, and we can build a story around that, then let's do it. So, but it's always build local first, and then add those international kind of guests second. But I think if you've got the local part right, then it's going to be great. You're going to fill a room and you're going to put on a good show. But try and pepper a little bit. Find that balance. So maybe it's like 60-40, 70-30 in kind of local, talent favor. That's helped. That's kind of got us to where we are today. And I've seen very few failures. I've been to most of those shows across most of those countries, and again, just outside of the battle, learning about the culture, and that's the bit that no one sees through Instagram or through our videos, is the experience that we have, that again, now that I'm getting older, I'm reflecting on past 16 years, it's like very lucky to have been toured, all these cities by those local artists to then point out the best restaurants and the best underground speakeasy and the coolest hangs, and
nice.
And just the culture in general, just like a temperature check. Like you don't get that as a tourist, but we've always had this secret pass because you connect with those right folks that open the city up to you because they trust you, right? So that's a hard thing to do for you can't. Maybe that can't just be copied in a way, but I think if you build that way with that intention, then I think that's what's served us well.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
that makes sense. I love that, and I think my own experience. When we've created programs, that go into different markets, and it's all about connecting the locals maybe with their heroes that they never get to meet, or
definitely,
or forging new, the up and coming guys in 2 different markets that end up collaborating or stuff like that.
That's the magic as well. And that's what we saw in our very low budget version of our first tour. When we drove around Europe, we were bringing a couple of Brits along for the ride, but we were working, it was like it's kind of like England versus Holland, Amsterdam, England versus Germany, and we kind of created these like country battles. But it was the connectivity of sending artists to different countries for the first time that I started to hear stories from artists that had never really traveled before, that all of a sudden were on a flight to go do a Secret Walls, and they were like, oh, I hung out with this like local crew and I made friends for life and I learned this and this inspired me, and then collaborations and projects are born out of that, right? And Secret Walls plays a tiny part in connecting those dots, but I think we realized quite quickly that the event outside of the competition, it was that some of the press had noticed it pretty quickly. It was a safe kind of creative, it wasn't too cool for school. It was kind of a place where you had a mixed crowd that people could come, be inspired, but also meet other like-minded folks. And that was something, again, we didn't build by design, but it kind of somehow became a thing. And that's something that we're trying to continue to like remember and bottle up as we build. Is how do you create those same moments, those kinds of spaces. And yeah, that was the value that we were given to artists. And you're right, like it's when you fly certain artists in that are their heroes. We did that in Jakarta, and a lot of the Jakarta guys, super talented, but don't have the means to travel.
Sure.
They haven't got the dollars, but skill-wise, they're as good as any of the guys here in America. But we flew some big guns in, and we all got drunk together and battled together, and it was just like a whole life-changing kind of moment. And,
That's cool.
And now it's opened up channels, and we're trying to bring them over here, and again, it's just cool to see. So that kind of exchange is dope.
So one of the things I've always loved about graffiti is the competitive nature of it, right? That I've always said, like, I don't know if Monet and Manet were like battling it out, right? At least not in the direct sense of of what you do. And we've heard stories from some of the OGs of like guys getting thrown off the roofs, and graffiti was tied up with gangs, and the competition was not friendly.
Yeah.
Right. Do you run into that at all? Like, I think obviously you're trying to keep it competitive.
Yeah.
And people take it really seriously.
There's been some heated moments on stage.
Sure.
Not many, but there's been some chairs thrown, artists versus artists, and certain graffiti crew pissed because certain other artists lost. And, we've had some crazy times, but I look at that as like, it adds to the entertainment,
Yeah, for sure.
We look at like UFC and boxing and wrestling as ways to like, inspire ourselves to create a better show. And when there's that emotion like that in the room, obviously not dangerous, that's not something that we endorse, but if it's a little bar scrap or a chair flying, that's only adds to the story.
Sure.
We've seen artists like line someone else out on the other side, which isn't very sportsmanlike, but at the time it was a world's first for us.
It's relevant to the culture.
Yeah, and he had a graffiti beef with certain other artists and had to make a certain message, and I was pissed at the time. I was like, wow, okay, you just destroyed guys' work. But I look back on it, and when I see him in the pub, you kind of laugh about it. And, so yeah, it kind of comes into it, but it's never been that serious or dangerous. But there are some graffiti artists that are in and out of trouble that, I'm aware of certain stories, but yeah, it doesn't really come into the arena so much of Secret Walls. So yeah, I don't know. I hear stories from like Slick and the boys here. LA seems crazy back in the day. I just hear now as like the old days. It's like guns and bullets flying and gangs, and that doesn't really happen in London.
Sure.
It was like, I think knife crime's a thing, but guns don't really exist so much in England, and
we love our guns out here.
Yeah. Gang violence is similar to like Japan in England. It's like it's very hidden. It's kind of you don't really see it.
Sure.
But out here, from some of the stories I was told, and all the way back to the riots, there was like some insane times.
Definitely.
So.
And so, how do you think about you're working at the same time with huge brands that care a lot about brand safety, about the kind of your point, you've got these conditions that you want your partners to meet, they have as well, right? So but you've been really successful at taking a kind of illegal subversive art form and bringing it to some of the biggest brands in the world.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
That's been the thing I've had to learn from scratch, was translate. In the early days, it was harder because you were trying to sell this culture and these artists to a brand and say this is safe and it's going to be family friendly and we can behave ourselves and, you know, kind of have to beg a little bit more, like give us a chance. You know, now it's kind of easier because we've got a million case studies to point at and go, this is what we did over here, and we know the kinds of artists that fit that brief, and you know, it just comes second nature. It's like, okay, you gave me this creative brief, it's soccer inspired. There's certain artists that love soccer and draw certain things that I'll go straight to. But Slick's maybe always, I used his name already a bunch of times, but Slick and MLS we did last year. Again, certain brands might be scared of an artist like Slick and past history or just the connection between certain crews. But MLS are pretty safe as well and are a solid like supporter and client of ours. And it's a conversation and certain questions might come up, like, you know, and there might be a do's and don'ts list of this is a family friendly crowd, so can we stick to this and don't do that, and no drawing of guns and knives and drugs, and so that stuff comes up, and I'm the guy that's translating between Slick and the brand, and that was actually an easy conversation, and Slick was allowed to do pretty much what he wanted within reason. Built a sculpture, made a LA hand mural in the kind of colorway of that All-Star game. But other than that, MLS respected us as artists and creatives and was like, let Slick be Slick. But just, let's stick and be inspired by this brief. And I know Slick's super pro. And again, it was an easy one. But sometimes, you know, as long as artists tell us what they're comfortable in doing and not doing, I suppose that's just part of the daily hustle is trying to locate the right artists, explain the brief, get that kind of do's and don'ts list from the brand. Some are more sensitive than others. And then just have those conversations. Sometimes they opt out and say, it's not for me. It's very rare because I feel like me and Max have kind of got there's a certain, done it so many times that you just know who's going to be into it. Sometimes the dollars might not be right, or sometimes the creative brief might not be right. You know, but again, we kind of know where certain people net out and what people's feelings are. So
I also think the more you do it, right, the more the community becomes more comfortable. Right. And they say, okay, well, you know, Slick did it, or, you know, all these other people. So I guess I can find a space for myself in there as well.
And every, you know, artists know that what we are as a brand, and I think they expect a certain level of creativity and curation. So usually there's very few projects where, again, I feel it was a failure or we sold out, because I don't think we've done anything that's like a complete flop. But I think there's times where it could have been better. But yeah, you learn from that, and kind of, I think artists, again, having the artist's support and trust is key for a brand like us. If we don't have that, then we're not in business, you know. Like, so it's built on artist trust and communication, which is kind of why I'm obsessed with this like whole new Web3 world of how do we all communicate and benefit, and you know, there's all the other business monetary things with blockchain and all this new stuff that allows you to disrupt the old school art scene and maybe kind of, you know, just, I don't want to say destroy, but like it turns the gallery model of gallery gets lion's share, artist gets whatever left. Everything changes now, and this is the kind of new world that really excites me. It's like sequels can play a really big part in that, because we've been fighting that fight for a long time, but there were certain things we could and couldn't do before this kind of Web3 blockchain world. Now there's like what we do with the art, you know, and all these other opportunities that present themselves. So I think, it's exciting, man. Yeah,
I mean, talk about that a little bit more. So you're 16 years in, and you know, I know as an entrepreneur, it's a grind, and it's, you know, I think keeping your own head in the game is sometimes the challenge. And you go to managing people and investors and brands and, you know, all that stuff. So how do you, and now you're exploring all this technology side, right? So how do you kind of monitor yourself and stay excited and engaged? And
I also had a kid, like he's 2.5, so he was born a month before the pandemic started.
Wow.
So I became a new parent as well, which was a challenge, you know.
Yeah, I bet.
Still figuring that out.
Of course.
So yeah, I don't have as much time as I like.
Yeah.
I don't go out as much as I used to. Social life is not the same, but no regrets and love being a dad. But yeah, like basically having the right team around you to go to the shows that now I can't go to, and making sure that we're finger on the pulse, you know, in this LA scene, and you know, as far as London and back, and just trying to stay in tune. But yeah, wearing a lot of hats is just something that I've had to learn to deal with. It's not perfect. Kind of being the CEO, the founder, all of a sudden you're physically producing a battle because we're a small team, and I enjoy it. I like being on the front line. So we did 2 battles last week, and I'm out there on stage, you know, with the producer, just supporting. I just like being near the artist, making sure they're happy. They got a beer in their hand, pens juiced up, everything's ready to go. It's just an obsessive thing in my head that it's where we started, like painting the white walls, you know, ready for the battle. It's just all hard to pull back from. Yeah. But I'm learning how to kind of maybe step back a little bit, and you got to trust your team a little bit more. And as you hire new people, you got to delegate a little bit more. That's all part of my new learning curve is as I get older and as the business grows. And we're about to add another 10 people over the next 6 to 12 months. So we're already actively identifying and interviewing, and it's a whole thing. It's all new to me. So I've hired a CEO, a good friend, Kevin, who's based out of Chicago. He comes from an agency background, so he's run offices of like 50 plus and built businesses that are like turning over $20-30 million a year or whatever. And he's come into this like weird little scrappy sequels job, and I've kind of, you know, friends for a long time. He brought a lot of cool brands and opportunities to us. And I'm kind of leaning on people like that because I know that he has, you know, those kinds of people have the experience that I lack. Yeah. And you just have to recognize that as the founder and as, you know, just where your weaknesses are and you know, try and fill the gaps.
I mean, that's big. I think for most guys in your chair, that's, you know, the letting go is the hardest
it's tough,
part.
Yeah, it's tough because every day I sometimes emotionally argue about, you know, not argue, but creatively argue about certain parts of the show that need to stay true to the original. And then, you know, I'm getting better at just allowing the dialogue to flow and end up at a place where everyone's happy. Yeah. Because Kev now looks at it from business side of things because he's CEO, and that's what he's there to do, is to like bring the next hire in and make sure we're being efficient. And then I'm there as founder with a lot of passion, mainly for the arts, less so for the dollars. And I love the fact that he's now focused on the money, really, and I can get back into culture, and that's the sweet spot. And I think that's important. But yeah, still even with him, you know, we're still you always feel short, like you need more people, and
of course,
kind of going from an investor chat. Yeah, like me and Kevin talking about last week. It's in one day last week we had an investor pitch where we kind of don't really know if we even need investment, but we kind of just have the calls because we like to just explore. So it's like we were in this weird room talking about investment. Then we jumped into a client call talking about the coolest battle that we've got this year, hopefully. Then you kind of take the hat off and you're calling an artist and just catching up. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're being a dad, and, you know, I work from home a lot. So kind of go into that mode.
Yeah, nice.
And then you go back into chasing an invoice and just stressing about a certain like set of tasks that might not have been done, and, you know, production mode. So I was saying to Kev, like, we're still splitting ourselves in quite a few areas, and it's stressful, but it's also no regrets. It's like I wouldn't want to be doing a 9-to-5 job. I'm super happy that some days are harder than others, and every week's kind of different to me. It's like, you know, we're not doing it's not an office job, you know.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
So I'm super. Again, I try and, as you get older, you kind of get soft and I try and reflect a little bit more, just appreciate the moment. Whereas before in the 20s, 30s, kind of sprinting at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and maybe didn't appreciate all those like global chapters. Yeah. So I just try and slow down a little bit more now and just enjoy that.
Yeah, that's big.
Minute.
By the way, you know, raising a kid in this culture is super fun.
Yeah.
I was taking my son to b-boy battles with this guy
Yeah.
when he was 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, and took him. I bought him his first piece of art at a Risky show.
Oh, wow.
He was 7. I let him pick it out, and he's got that on his wall. And
It's like life-changing stuff as
Yeah,
well.
for sure.
As young as 7 to like go. I mean, I wish I was able to be in those like spaces that young.
of course.
But I'm kind of excited as my little guy grows. You know, getting him into soccer and the arts, and kind of he's already been immersed with murals, and he's already pointing things out, and you can see his brain like working in weird, fun ways. And
Absolutely.
yeah, no, excited.
Yeah, it makes you appreciate it from a whole different perspective.
Yeah. No, I'm really excited to kind of show him our little world that we've built and see what comes out of it, and see what he chooses to do.
Love it.
It's going to be cool.
Love it. Well, let me do a quick lightning round before we let you
Yeah.
get back to work. Okay, which favorite city to travel to?
Historically, Tokyo. Been there 10 plus times and was obsessed by it.
Love it.
And want to get back. So Tokyo, yeah, I'll stick to that.
I love it. Who's your favorite DJ?
Weirdly, no one probably knows who it is, but DJ Yoda comes to mind.
yeah.
Like an old funny remix, copy and
Like
paste
how
guy.
to cut and paste.
Yeah,
It's
cut
his
and paste
thing.
was, I don't really listen to his music very much anymore, but just a crazy fun
Yeah.
DJ,
I remember Yoda.
or DJ Shadow, other than that, So yeah, it's that kind of vibe.
Nice. What's the last great book you read or listened to?
The wife says I don't read books very well. I buy books, I don't read them.
Yeah.
I got a mounting of books that I kind of think I'm going to read and I never read. But Tipping Point was one that I actually finished.
Cool.
So I'll probably stick to that. That was in the early days of
That's a good one.
Yeah.
What movie do you think you've seen the most in your life?
Probably Warriors, because I was obsessed by
Nice.
that for a while. Probably Warriors, yeah.
It's a great movie.
And Battle Royale, do you remember that one?
No.
Japanese.
Oh, no, I don't know it.
A lot of American spin-offs, maybe.
Okay.
But it was kind of, I think they made a second one that flopped, but definitely check that out. It's quite gory, but it's kind of like a bunch of like outcast kids, similar to, what was the Korean Netflix thing that was massive last year?
Parasite.
No,
Squid Game.
Squid Games.
Yeah.
It kind of Squid Games copied Battle Royale. Battle Royale's like 20 years old.
Oh, wow.
I feel like everyone's copied it in a way, but yeah, the Japanese kids got sent to an island and then they had to survive, and there was one winner, and they all got given scrappy weapons and
Nice.
yeah, all kinds of stuff. But
Did you see Rebel Kings?
Rebel Kings.
Rebel Kings.
No.
You have to
Rebel
watch it.
Kings.
It's the documentary.
Oh, hang on.
Basically, that Warriors is based on.
Yeah. No, I met the director.
Did you?
I forget his name, but
Yeah.
randomly I met him at a party, and he told me he was pitching and raising money for that. And I've never seen it,
It's great.
but yeah, no,
Yeah. It's like it's the true story behind the Warriors.
Okay, all right, maybe I
Amazing.
should check that out.
Who's somebody that you've learned a lot from that you've never met?
Never met. Geez, big question. I used to say like Branson, but I don't resonate really with his latest moves.
Sure.
I used to like his entrepreneurial kind of vibes back in the day when he was like Virgin Music and Virgin Atlantic.
Seems like he kind of lost his way.
Yeah, feels like it.
We should all be so lucky to have that luxury.
Yeah, he was like that guy, jumped in a hot air balloon and just put himself on the front line and started Virgin Atlantic with not a lot of money and kind of just hustled. But now it's different times. But yeah, Branson, I was someone that I always thought would be a cool conversation. But in real life, if I'm allowed to answer, someone that I was looking up to, but then got a chance to meet and work for, was Mark Echo.
Sure.
Original graffiti streetwear guy. He gave us the first American show, and as someone that I kind of really want to reconnect with, because he when we were in the early days of Secret Walls, that first show in New York, did this battle in his like basketball office court thing, and he was making loads of money from Echo clothing, and just released that graffiti game, and he was like, you know, on top of the world. And then I think a few years later went bankrupt, but he was good enough to like give us 30 minutes of just young kids trying to hustle and make it in America, and he was just giving us pointers, and kind of that really stuck. So yeah, I think Echo was a big influence in where we are today.
Yeah. What about since we have a lot of graph fans listen to the show, who are some young guys that we should have our eyes on?
Yeah, young artists, Nina Paluma. Awesome LA-based artist. She just kind of character illustrations, a bit of everything, VR, physical illustration, you know, like all artists, that's super hybrid. Gabe Galt, his dad's like a Super Bowl winner, but he's this like amazing portrait artist that's killing it. I think he just did NFL drafts, VR murals in the metaverse. Who else? Dragon 76, Japanese artist based out in New York. Okay. He's got a studio in the World Trade Center. Nice. Super humble, insane, doing a lot of stuff for like Kevin Durant and things. But yeah, super humble. Those are the three that come to mind. But there's so many. So many. Yeah.
Of course. Last one, if I worked for Secret Walls, what's something I would hear you say over and over?
Probably Silas, like an artist, say it like 20 times a day. But that I'll probably stick with that. I'll probably say it too much, but it's ingrained in the brain. So
all right,
yeah,
love it, man. Thanks for doing this.
Cool,
man. So much fun.
Thanks. Yeah, I forgot to wear my nice sneakers. I totally forgot there was a camera. So
you're all good. You're representing Reebok.
Yeah, I know. Again, they're comfortable. You know,
classics are the best.
I need to replace these. I'd literally wear them on all productions, but
there's nothing wrong with classics.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, right on, man.
Cool. Thank you.
Yo, that was Terry Guy on Rebel Radio. Make sure you check out Secret Walls online. Go to a show, buy some stuff. I don't know, new support. And most importantly, come back next week for more Rebel Radio. Peace.